Okay, welcome everyone. Another Foundry guide for you. This one we're going to be focusing on the basic of mods and the mods that I use for my 5e games. But before I do that, as per usual, this video is going to be having a shout out for the LFG Europe community. Links for the Reddit and the Discord are in the description below. Please do check it out and jump in when you can. Starting off from our DM view right at the start of our admin screen, we find our mod pretty simply. We go to our middle tab for the add-ons and modules, clicking it open, and this is our mod list we already have installed. Not all these are for D&D games, but they're all the mods that I have actively installed. To install a mod, we go to install module at the bottom. It pops up a dialog box similar to what it did when we installed a rule set, and then from there we can search our mods in the top right, filter by certain content, and then just click the install button when we have a mod we want to install. From that, once we've installed our mod, it's important you should probably check to update your modules every so often. You do that by just clicking the update all button in the bottom corner, and it goes through and updates everything for you. Letting that tick through for a little bit. And that's all our mods updated and set up for this guide then. Going over to our game modes like we normally do, going to workshop. When I get the password incorrectly, I can clear all that from our last tutorial. And we're going to focus mainly on the landing page. To really go into details of your mods once you're in the world, and the top right in your main UI bit, you have your settings, you click it open. And then we have manage modules between configure settings and configure players. Opening manage modules, we get this list. This is the mods we have installed, we went through, we've seen before. We enable it by checking the ones we want on. I'm going to go through them in order. I'm going to start with the ones that I think are most important for your D&D games. So let's start with the core. We really want D&D Beyond importer, if you have D&D Beyond. We're also going to want better rules for 5e, and ideally there's something else we want. Nope, we'll leave it at that then. Those two modules are the ones you are really going to want for that. Some modules have dependencies. When that pops up, we understand. Make sure we have our modules installed. Go back and find it, which is libprepper. And then we notice we don't get that error message anymore. The D&D Beyond module, what that does is it allows us to go down into our compendiums option, clicking into D&D B Monster Muncher, we get this screen. We would input our Patreon key. This allows you to import stat blocks and items direct from the D&D Beyond website. It does require a bit of setup, as you can probably see by the menu, but I'll do that in a separate video. Another thing D&D Beyond lets you do from the outset is it pops up with a button on a character sheet. We can click it, and we can import characters in using their character ID, which is the string of numbers you get at the end of your character sheet. Next up, you will notice we installed better rules for D&D. You will notice in the last video where I went through rolling, rolling is really awkward in Foundry. What this module does is it simplifies the rolls. We still get the ability check thing, pops up, and unlike before, we can now roll advantage, roll disadvantage. It'll just roll it through everything automatically. Going to weapons as well, you notice it rolls the attack and damage instantly. And we also see we have the buttons down here, which I thought were default but are not, where we can just toggle individual things. So we have the attack roll by itself, its alternate roll. If it has versatile damage, it'll roll a versatile damage for that. And then we can also just send the raw info through, which for this mace, it doesn't seem to have anything. As we clear our chat again. So that's the two really core important modules you want for D&D Beyond. for 5e games. Next up, these are modules which are useful for DMs, but don't really offer much. I would recommend DMs get Cursor Hider. What this does, it allows you to, when you will see players, everyone has a floating cursor including the DM. Cursor Hider allows you to hide it. Then we're probably going to want actual private roles. It just hides your GM role, but it breaks something else. Dice tray is really useful. It puts a dice tray in the bottom chat bot. You'll see it when I enable the mods again. GM screen and GM secret block are really useful. Grid scale menu is useful for setting up your maps. It allows you to, instead of having to fiddle around in the map settings, you can just do it on the map itself, like you could in Roll20. Monks modules are very useful. I recommend everyone gets them. Next up, you're going to want pings, playlist importer, scene defaults, simple fog of war if your party does it. I don't like line of sight fog of war. I think it just makes things too difficult to run. This is Sky's Alternate 5e is a sheet fix. You'll notice that players that don't have the correct resolution on their monitors can't see their character sheet fully. The Sky's Alternate 5th edition sheet fixes that for you, so you won't have that issue. Tokenizer and token mode are also super important modules. What Tokenizer does is it allows you to automatically create tokens inside of Foundry rather than having to go to token stamp. Token mode allows you to add unique descriptors to your monsters. So that instead of in the combat log you just have a bunch of goblins, you have a frail goblin or goblin 1, so on and so forth. We enable all these mods. We then go to Seller. Simple Fog of War. You'll see we have this menu here. We can now enable the Fog of War, and it works like a traditional Fog of War. And we can reveal areas to your players, like you could normally. It also has some unique settings. You can actually place images on top. So we have the fog overlay image. This is what they see instead of just the black. Very useful. It's good for overland maps if you want to hide certain details and let them discover it like a hex crawl. Next up we have our map settings module. This allows us to adjust the offset and automatically set the grid. From that, we see at the bottom we have now got we have playlist importer module enabled. This allows us to click this button, begin import, and because I didn't set the settings correctly, it's just imported loads of weird files, so I'll delete all that. But instead, if we go to our settings, configure settings, module centers, we see we have all these settings. If we go to playlist importer, which is probably just way at the bottom, playlist importer, we can set the music directory. So for me, it's my assets, sounds, music, and then I already sorted it. So for this D&D music, that current directory, close that down, and then if we try it again, it imports all my music. No, it didn't, because I didn't okay it. So let's try it again. Configure settings, way down at the bottom. After pings, we have playlist importer. Click on there. My assets. Sounds, music, D&D music. Select current directory. Make sure it's set. Save settings. Please work this time. There we go. And now if I cancel my usual background music. Playlist importer has completed its task. Thank you very much. And now I can play the music direct from Foundry itself. It allows me to use all my effects that I usually have on as well. Ticking clock, for example. All the basic stuff that I have preset up ready for this. Okay. Now I have to reset levels, and then with that module out the way. Next, a lot of the new modules are now going to be in our settings menu. we go module settings, we have the settings for the modules we've already covered. As I go down to where is it? I must have imported that one. Anyway, before I go on that module then, you'll see the bottom right now, I have dice options to make rolling even simpler. And now, because I have the pings module enabled as well, I can left click and hold, and I get a ping like so. See at the bottom as well, I have my player characters listed. I get the armor class and passive perception listed to me straight away. DM sees this, not the players. From here as well, I get several buttons. I can free movement, no movement, so I can lock a character's token in place. I can go into combat turn order, so they can't move unless it's their turn. I can request a certain roll from someone, so if I select a character, request a roll. I can request a perception roll, and it pops up. They get notified of it, and they can roll for it. And then I can dictate if it passes or fails. I can also assign XP to them if I do use that way. So that's the Monk's toolkit there. Next up, GM screen. I can pop this up, I can customize it like I could a normal GM screen. So I can change the size of all these options. I can customize it further in the menu, but what this allows me to do is, if I go to journals, I can put text blocks down there. Monster stat blocks in here. I can even roll from here. And it pops up like normal. It's a really useful thing. I usually just use it for journals though. Next up, one of my favorite modules and a module players seem to love, not that. Is if I go to back into my module settings, manage modules. Dice so nice. For some reason, players love this module because it gives them a lot of freedom. If I save the setting, you see that as I get a pop-up. It's the first time you ever get this pop-up. This is individual. It's like a whisper message to each of your players. If I click it open, I can customize my 3D dice. So I can select the themes. I can set loads of things about them. And then from there, once I've selected my dice that I want to use, they come up on the screen. Obviously, for the more complicated modules, like the D&D Beyond Importer, I'm going to do a separate video for. But if I go, you will see that I haven't listed all the modules that I use yet. Some of these modules will get further tutorials as I need to cover them. And that's it for this one. Thank you everyone for jumping in and watching. I hope this guide was helpful for you all. I am doing a live stream in a couple of days of me prepping for an adventure, and a live stream where you're going to show Foundry in use from the DM's perspective with all the modules I use. I hope to see you there, and I hope everything has been great for you guys.